If you change some values in the property pane, let's say I'm gonna disable this component, say. Now I have a green arrow. The green arrow always roll back to the default value. So right now it's false. I press this one and it's gonna pop up as true. You have that on every settings over here. I change the value to 15 and a green arrow we're gonna show. I just press that one, it's gonna go back to 0. So that you have in the property pane, just so you know. Let's take a look at some of the inputs on several components. Some of the components can have several inputs to the same input pin. Let's take as example a text value. We're going to take two text values and connect those to formatted text. And on that one we're gonna add text element, connect these two to that one. Now you see both can be sent simultaneously at the same time to the formatted text, while some components can't. I'm gonna take text to compare text, for example. So if I take these two and input it on the same pin, take a look at the first one I dragged in here, it's gonna get removed. That's because it's a single input, it's not multiple, and this differs on some of the components. So what I think you should do as a beginner is to try to use a good method to control which value comes first. And to do that, you're gonna use multi-text. Okay, if I type in the filter here, multi-text gonna have two sorts of connection, inputs and outputs. Multiple outputs is gonna be when it comes from one source and you can make it go to several places. And this one is very important to know about, because when you just take one like this and connect it to several and save the project, it might not act the same as it did before you saved. If you close it and open it up, it might have changed the order on which one of the components get the values first. And in your sketch, when you're processing many values, it might be necessary to control which value reaches first. So let's say this value gets go into several components, and after a while they might go together once again. This happens a few times, and then you need to control which one reaches the endpoint first. To do that, always use the multi-source, and if you need more than two inputs, outputs, whatever, just drag it out. You have other symbol over here, so just can do as many outputs as you want. The other one is the inputs, and this is used every time you need to connect several sources to one component that cannot use more than one input at the same time. So this one is one of those examples. So then you just drag all these components to the same input, and the same as outputs, you can make more, and then drag this one to the input of the next component. Try to use this method all the time, not only when you need it, because it's a good practice. And you can Sometimes you can use it as for example if you're using Nexion display. This is a bit advanced, but it's a very good practice nevertheless. So I'm going to use the command and close this. Sometimes you need to make sure the command you're going to process gets its value first, and then after that you're going to use the clock. This is for the advanced users, but I'm going to show it anyway. So this feature, sync pin, I'm going to show it later, makes it 2 inputs, and if you use multi-text, output, you can drag the first one to the command, and the second one you can use as a clock. In that way you can make all types of values getting processed. Let's say let's say page 1. That's a command. And if you want more than one possible command to get into this way and getting processed, you can just add the other one. Add the multi-in. Like so. Okay, now you have the power to use more than one command to the same command input. It's very powerful. That's a bit advanced, but you get to see the possibilities with using multi-in and multi-out. Alright, so that's the multi-in, multi-out, multiple sources. As you just saw, some of the components use something called a clock. The clock is pretty much just a trigger, so when you're using a clock, you can make sure that it sends a value at the exact time or interval that you want. So like this, for example. I'm gonna type test, and if you look at the properties of the clock generator, you see the frequency is 1. That means 1 hertz, which means once every second. So if you want it more often, you type in a higher value. If you would like it less often, type a lower value. Okay, the default is 1. So I'm gonna upload this. Okay, it's gonna be sending this value only once. So when I connect, it's gonna show up once and no more. Okay, this might not be a problem as you see, but some cards, when you connect it to the serial terminal, it's not gonna be resetting the board. It's just gonna connect it to it, and then when it connects without having to reset the board, you're not gonna see any test value. So this checkbox is by default checked. So if I unchecked it, this reset and connect, you're not gonna see any value, at least sometimes. It all depends on how quick you are to connect to this to start see all the values. But on some board, this reset doesn't take. It's not gonna reboot. Wemos is one of those. So try to use a way to control it for sure, and that is a clock generator. There are several ways to make a clock signal come to the components you can use. Let's see, I had text multi. As you just saw, I can use all kinds of values act as a clock. As long as the value changes, it's still gonna be a clock signal. Some of them like digital, let's say pulse, this is gonna be acting a little bit different than the text multisource if you use it as a clock, because the pulse generator is a true value and a false value sent, one of each every second, if you're not gonna change the frequency. And the whole cycle, the whole true and false, is gonna be like acting like a clock. So if you have a button, for example, and take that one over there, let's say you have a button, you see it's gonna be a clock symbol. It's not necessarily gonna be acting the way you want, because you might need to push and release a button, and some buttons are gonna stay down. So in those cases you might need to use a detect edge. I know it's a lot of components to grasp. So in this case, when the value gets high or true, it's gonna send one clock. So that's a good way to make sure that it's gonna be fully controlled depending on the value. And this doesn't always need to be a button. It can be, let's say, compare text. So if you're using something with a digital output, and in this example compare text could be test. So if this matches whatever component, let's say like this, so this value is test and the compare value, what it's looking for, is test. So when I sent this value over here, it's gonna say it's true because it matches, and then it's gonna be a detect edge rise, because it goes from false to true, and that's gonna be the same as a clock signal. And uploaded, and we're gonna take a look at it. Here is what a clock signal looks like. It sends, on the startup, sends this value test to the compare value. It's gonna check if the value is equal as whatever text you typed in here, and if it is, it's gonna turn true, and when it's turned true, it's gonna go from false to true, which means it's gonna be a rise, and then it sends a clock. Alright, that's pretty much to take in, but it's very important to know a way to control the flow. If you don't, it's gonna be acting a bit random, and you're very restricted to what components you can use. In the next part, we're going to talk about the most important categories to learn first, and why some components are more interesting than others, and also how to control the flow. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next part.